Hi there. Alright, so we are in Warsaw. We're walking around the old town today in between shots. And today I'm going to answer a question, which is, what are your views on Photoshop and retouching? I mean, this is Photoshop and retouching is a huge part of photography nowadays. I started off with film when I first started shooting 20 years ago. And the way we retouched in those days was I would print out the pictures, and then I would send the photos to a retoucher in Paris who had lots of tiny little paintbrushes, and she would very delicately and carefully use her little inks and paint over or retouch the blemishes out, and just tiny little things, maybe some wrinkles, some spots and stuff like that. But there was no fixing creases on clothes or pushing in waists or making eyes bigger or anything like that. Now, because we couldn't change things in post, before you took the picture you had to make sure that the collar was straight and there was no creases and that there was no blemishes and all these sort of things. You had to make sure everything was perfect before you got the shot. Nowadays, the expression "I will fix it in post" is probably one of the most used expressions on a photo set. Now, when digital photography began, and alongside that came Photoshop, that was a massive shift. Now people, photographers, creative directors, magazines, everybody got very power crazy with the use of Photoshop. They suddenly realized that anything was possible. They could swap heads, they could make waists slimmer, they could make eyes bigger, they could do all these things, which as an industry we went way too far. All of a sudden people were retouching so much that girls didn't have hips anymore in pictures. They were just like, the waists were like this, hair was flowier. I mean, it was very obvious what was happening. Gradually though, the general public started to become more educated about what liquefy meant and what Photoshop can do and how you can take out all sorts of wrinkles and you can take out all sorts of pores on the skin and everything. And this was a massive thing, because then the public started crying bullshit when they saw images of celebrities or models. And that was a really good thing, because all of a sudden the photography industry and the fashion industry were held accountable in what they were showing to the public and how they were using Photoshop and everything to make things look completely unrealistic. So there was definitely a time where the industry was using Photoshop way too much, and all of a sudden you had models with no skin texture whatsoever. Everybody looked plastic. And I think we had to go that far in order to come back a bit. We had to sort of use Photoshop to the extreme, to the point where it was ridiculous, in order to come back to a safer place or a more reasonable place. 10, 15 years ago, I remember, for example, I was doing a cover of a very famous pop star for an American magazine that I was shooting for. I gave them my selection, my edit, and they said, "Oh, we don't really feel that it's the right face. Can we please just sort of see some other options?" I showed them other options, and they said, "It's not quite right. We're going to take the eyes from this face, the mouth from this face, the nose from this face." Now, the trouble with that is every muscle is connected in the face. So if you're smiling like this, all of this gets pulled up, this gets pulled down, everything's connected. So if you suddenly take these eyes with this mouth, it's not going to work. The night before the magazine went to print, I asked the magazine to show me what they come up with. It ended up looking like a Barbie doll, not in a good way, a Barbie doll face. Didn't look anything like the celebrity. And when I put that image next to the image that I had originally given them, it was exactly the same, except my one looked real. So I think it was just a case of a lot of clients and a lot of creative directors and magazines, when they got hold of Photoshop, they just went crazy. They realized that they could have as much of creative input as the photographer could. It used to be a fact that just the photographer would give their pictures retouched by a lady with a paintbrush, and that was the picture, and they couldn't change it. They could crop it maybe, but they couldn't change it. Also, retouching has come a lot into the news recently because, you know, certain people were called out for head swapping and retouching images that went out to the press. So what do we say about that? Well, I think we have to be honest in the fact that very little photography goes out unretouched these days. Now, what's the argument for and against that? Firstly, as I said before, in the old days, I sound like such an old fart when I say that. In the old days, when we shot film, as I said, we made sure that everything was perfect before we shot the picture. But that's because we had a lot more time on set. I remember doing fashion shoots where you had to do a 10, 12-page story and you had 3 days to shoot it. Nowadays, you have to shoot 20 pictures, plus a cover, plus social media content, plus a moving cover, plus all this sort of digital stuff, and that's all in one day. So there is much less time given on shoots. Now that means that's where digital photography and Photoshop comes in really handy, because it means that whereas you might have taken an extra 15 minutes to make sure that the jacket is clipped at the side so it's nice and even, you might say, now forget it. I've got she looks great, the hair's great, I can fix the jacket in post. So that is one good method of using Photoshop. You can see it's a time-saving thing for something that you would be able to fix in reality, but you're choosing to do it afterwards. So there's a very fine line between retouching and, let's say, hair and makeup and lighting. If you look at the authentic me, let's use me as an example. Right here I have heavy shadows under my eyes, I might have a pimple on my nose here, maybe my hair's a bit sort of like scraggly on the side. So if somebody was going to take a picture of me for a magazine, they would put me into hair and makeup. Because if you put me into hair and makeup for an hour and put beautiful lighting on me, where the lighting is just beautiful and it's nice and an even lighting and there's no shadows on my face and it fills in all my bags, that is manipulating the ingredients around me in order to show the best version of me. So I think that if we're allowing hair, makeup and lighting to happen, then we should be okay with a certain degree of digital manipulation. Now I'm not talking about thinning your face or making your nose smaller or making your eyes bigger. I'm talking about taking out a pimple. I'm talking about taking out maybe a little wrinkle or a bag under your eyes. Now we should also talk about the fact that digital photography is ruthless when it comes to skin. It shows every single tiny pore with the definition of multitude of pixels. So even if you put somebody in the most flattering light, you still are going to pick up any tiny little irregularity that a normal naked eye wouldn't even see. When we used to shoot film, we didn't have that problem. There was a certain softness to it, maybe, let's say. So when you're shooting digital, especially high definition digital, you're going to have to treat it somehow with some sort of filter or some sort of just softening tool or some grain. So that puts it in the class of retouching. So let's talk about a grey area of Photoshop that people agree and disagree on. Let's pretend we are taking a picture of 5 celebrities walking down the street for a magazine. Now, celebrities don't want to give you a whole day to take one picture. They want it quick, they want it snappy, they want to get in and get out, bada boom, bada bing. So you are working against the clock. Let's say you take pictures and there's one beautiful image where all the bodies are fantastic, everybody's striding, they're looking good. Out of the 5 people, 4 people have beautiful smiles, they're laughing, beautiful, everything's great. The 5th person happens to be blinking. If you go to the frame just before that, that person looks great. So is it wrong to take that head from the frame before and to put it onto the other image so all 5 people look great? Personally, I don't think so. One could argue that it's not real. It didn't happen at that time. But then I would say, well, it did happen. It just happened in 2 different frames, 1 second apart from each other. So I think in today's rushed industry where we have minimal time to get these pictures, Photoshop is a very useful tool, but we have to be responsible with it. We have to know when to use it and when not to use it. And we also have to know when to stop using it. The trouble is, if you keep looking at an image, you can find things wrong and need fixing and need fixing and need fixing. So that by the time you've actually stopped retouching it, it looks nothing like what it used to. So is retouching bad? Is Photoshop bad? I wouldn't say it's bad. I think it's a tool that we need to employ, just in the same way that we use lighting, the same way we use hair and makeup. Something that helps us get the best version of what we're photographing if we are working within the fashion and beauty and portrait industry, but not use it irresponsibly. Through the ages, we've always wanted to make ourselves look better, right? If you were a noble back in the day and you wanted an artist to paint your picture, that artist would probably, if they were worth their salt, make you look good. They wouldn't paint you with the blemish you happen to have that day. They wouldn't paint you with the bags under your eyes which you happen to have because you didn't get a good night's sleep last night. So I think through the ages, we've always tried to show the best version of ourselves. And I think Photoshop is just another tool in our toolbox, and we just have to use it responsibly. So that's it. Hope I answered your question.